what's going on? What you've got here is a whole bunch of statements, okay? Credit cards are done from month to month. Just like if you were earning interest, right? You'd get a monthly statement and you'd say, okay, this is how much you've earned, right? So you can see what's going on. You start with an opening balance. So that's how much you have spent on the credit card. In this case, it looks like maybe the person opened the account on the 1st of March, okay? Now, this opening date is very important, right? The opening date here. The opening date is important because once the account opens for the month, the clock starts ticking, okay? The bank will give you some amount of time to pay back however much you spend within this time period, within this month, okay? And it all starts from the opening date. So for example, for this particular credit card, they're going to give you 55 interest-free days, which equates to 55 days to pay from this date when it's opened up, okay? From the opening date. Okay? So, anything that you buy within March or pay for within March on this credit card, right, you're going to have to pay off within 55 days of the 1st of March, okay? Now, in this case, they've already worked out for you. 55 days from the 1st of March, you can see, is the 24th of April, okay? So this here is plus 55 days. That's where that number comes from, okay? So in some senses, the idea is that you start buying things on the 1st of March, you go all the way through to the end of the month, and then when you get to March 30th, okay, you're like, okay, there's all of my things for the month, and now I've kind of got a few weeks just to tidy up and make sure I paid it off, okay? So you get to that time in April. Now have a look at the things that have been purchased so far. You got March 8th, they bought some furniture, setting up home. March 17th, they've bought some hardware, okay? Now this 55-day interest-free period, right? It doesn't apply to these individual items. It applies to the whole statement, okay? So therefore, you don't actually get 55 days free on that piece of furniture. How many days would you get? If you get 55 days from the 1st of March, then how many days are there left by the 8th of March? It'll be minus 7 days, right? A week has passed between here and here, okay? So that would make it 48 days to pay off this piece of furniture. Does that make sense? And by the same logic, I think, off the top of my head, I think it's 39 days to pay off this hardware, okay? So this 55 days doesn't reset for every single item. And that kind of makes sense, right? Because who is the person that you're getting all this money from? Answer, the bank, right? And the bank started your account here. Whereas these guys, they're like, I don't know where the money comes from. I don't care, so long as I get it, right? So the 55 days gets managed by the bank. So here's the opening balance. Here's the closing balance, which means that in the space of this month, at the end of March, how much did this person pay off of their debts? Answer, nothing. Yeah, they've just left it all sitting there, and that's kind of okay so far. But because there's money there, because there's a closing balance here, they're going to make you pay something. Right? They won't let you get away with just sitting around and not paying anything off. They're going to charge, and I think it's right here, $10 or 3% of the closing balance, whichever one is higher. Okay? So they calculate 3% of this, 3% of that, and what it comes down to is $52.41. Okay? So they're like, which one's higher? $10, $52. This one's higher, so that's what they charge you. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, this is going to ruin all the things I've written on the board. Have people got those down? Yeah, okay. Let me show you the next one. You don't have to write it, but let me show you what's happening. Okay, here we go. So what's happened? New month has started. New transactions in terms of things that have been purchased, right? But right here, on the 24th of April, that's an important date. On the 24th of April, they make a payment. Question, why did they pay on such a random date? Because that was the due date, okay? Now, hold on a second, just as a matter of interest. Like, it looks like they had that amount of money ready to go, okay? Why do you think they didn't pay it off any earlier? Why do you think they waited to the last second to pay it off? This is the amount, right? Up until April 23, right? This, well, actually, for any time, this amount of money can be in one of two places, okay? It's either in your bank account or it's in theirs, okay? So if it's with you, right, here's you, for every day this amount of money is in your bank account, what's it doing? It's not just sitting there, it's earning interest, right? So of course you want to hold on to this money as long as possible. Don't give it to these guys as much as I'd like it, right? As soon as it's in their hands, they're earning the interest and they can do stuff with it, okay? So if they give you 55 days, wait for 55 days, right? Don't give the money back to them sooner. Don't worry, they won't thank you for it even if you give it back to them earlier. So they wait till the last moment, they pay it off, okay? And then they buy something else, right? So the opening balance started from here, right? They paid that off. See, minimum payment due was this, but they decided not to do the minimum payment. They decided to pay off the lot, okay? So here's what's left, which is just comprised of these two figures, right? So how did they work out this figure here? Where did it come from?
$10 was 3%.
Good, so it was the two choices. They calculated 3% of this, which I think is gonna be like $6, okay? They're like, well, I can make more money if I charge them $10, right? So there's always this minimum bar, and that's what they've chosen. 25th of May, where did that come from? 55 days plus April 1st.
But on April 11th, they bought something else.
Yep.
Did they not have to pay? I don't understand, because the due date was the 25th of April.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so what you've got to consider, this is why it's so good that we have all of this here. Consider each statement kind of as its own self-contained thing, okay? So here's your March bundle of money and how much is owing on that, okay? When April begins, that March one kind of gets closed off. Nothing gets added back to it because I'm not in March anymore, right? So the amount that was owing on that was $1,747, right? When they put this in, this goes under the April statement, okay? And so therefore, when they paid off this, it's like, okay, March is over and now April's begun and all of these sums go onto a new closing balance.
So then, if they bought something there on April 11th, they don't have to pay that back to the 25th of May.
Right, so this April 11th thing, right, it comes under April, and the 55 days you get free take you to the 25th of May. Okay, so each month is its own thing. Why do you think they do that? Why do you think they divide it up like that?
That's more manageable for us.
Yeah, that's right. It's kind of like, look, people's minds get too confused if they're like, look, I've got all of these things and they're all just mixed together, okay? Also for the bank, right? I want to make sure you pay me back, right? So I can go and chase you and I can say, look, this is the sum of money. This is the particular sum of money that I'm after and it's due on this particular day, right? Otherwise, it's very, very hard to organize the due dates because then every single thing will have its own 55 days. Really confusing, okay? Yep.
What happens if you don't pay them back in time?
Okay, so let's suppose, right? There's one or two scenarios, right? So we hit 24th of April. Okay, we hit 24th of April. Now, because there was a minimum payment due, right? You've got to pay this or you're in breach of contract, right? And then they'll start, well, they will forcibly get this money out of you, okay? So they'll get that one way or another. But if all you do is pay that minimum amount, right? Okay, so you've got 1,747 minus the minimum amount, okay? So what's left? Let's see, 1, 6, 9, 5, 6? I'm just gonna say 9, something, okay? So now this is still sitting in my account as you owe me this, right? And I gave you 55 days to pay it, you haven't paid it, so now I'm gonna start charging you interest on it, okay? And that's gonna be a really, really large sum. 13%, 19%, whatever, depends on what kind of credit card you've got, okay? All right, really good questions. Does that make sense so far? Let's have a look at some of the questions rather than keep talking here. All right, so I'll zoom out a bit more. I'll give you some time to think of this, right? I will have to zoom out, unfortunately, so that you can see the data that you need, but let's just understand the questions first. Questions 1 to 3 refer to the credit card shown in the statements on the previous page. That's what you just wrote down, okay? The minimum payment for this credit card is this $10 or 3%, okay? So they're just gonna ask you to try and work out, well, if these are the closing balances, suppose, okay? How much are you gonna have to pay for each one? So you think about it, what are you gonna have to calculate? First, you'll need to calculate what is 3% of these closing statements, and then you just make a choice. Is it bigger than $10 or not? Okay. For this credit card, what would be the due date for purchases made in? Now, if they give you these dates, right? So here's a month, right? The first day is June 1st. So to work out its payment date, you would add 55 days, right? And you'll get a date. December 1st, you are going to add 55 days, and then you get a date, okay? They say February, not a leap year. Why do they do that? To make sure that when you add the 55, you'll land on the right day within March. Does that make sense?